Take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Hi, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm April
And I'm Verstine Henry.
Please check out our website at truthertalk.com. Find our archive shows, our essays, etc., etc. We are talking today to a guy who wrote a book about antidepressants or depression, and the book, it's not just about antidepressants, the drugs, it's actually more about how to heal yourself from depression. And his name's Craig Meriweather. The book is Depression 180. So are you excited to talk to him?
Yeah, I am. I've dealt a little bit with depression myself, and I didn't really realize that's what it was until I heard other people talking about their depression. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm going through, or that's what I went through, you know.
Yeah.
Because I didn't go to a doctor and they weren't like, you have depression, take this, you know. I just,
right.
You know, anyway, I think it's more common than people would like to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And I can see it being very common because of just of the lifestyles that we lead today. You know, a lot of people are hooked on social media, but to the point where they're basically trying to craft their lives on Facebook. I mean, I go on Facebook, I post like all day long because I'm on the computer doing other things, and if I see pictures of people or pictures or if I find links, my friends always joke, you know, I send them a lot of links and stuff. I do that, but I'm not trying to I notice people carefully plan their lives, what is the word I'm looking for? Trying to maybe invent another personality through social media because they're not they're always putting pictures. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm like, how do I say this without sounding like I'm judging these people, or looking down on them. I'm trying to say that people want to, have an image of what they want others to see them as, but it's not real. You know some of these people, and you're like, oh, you're not happy with your boyfriend. Why are you putting pictures of you guys smiling every 10 minutes? You're always calling me and telling me that, he's mean to you, he has a fight, but you're putting pictures of yourself with him like you're happy, or also just all of the depressing news that's on TV, all of the all of the stuff that we talk about. It should be mainstream news. Why aren't they talking about cures for cancer and the vaccine issue and all of these, and books on like this, the antidepressant, how to cure yourself naturally from antidepressants from depression without pharmaceutical drugs. Why isn't this? But yet it's killing and murdering and rape. Yet another school shooting. Commercials telling you that you're not worthy because you can't afford to buy a certain car or look a certain way, or it's just all fucking depressing, not to mention all the GMOs, all the white sugar that people are eating that's contributing to their health, and that's making them depressed. So it's very common. I think people have varying degrees of depression, but just look at what we're surrounded with. How are we supposed to be authentically happy in an environment like this? So I wonder if he thinks the same way I do about the television and just other aspects that are external too, as well as internal. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, it's, I think that a lot of reasons that people are depressed that we don't necessarily acknowledge or recognize is that so many people hate their work, and, they do it just to earn a living, to survive and to take care of their families, and, maybe they get just enough most people probably get just enough to pay the bills and to, go out to dinner a couple of times and do a few things here and there, but nothing really of any value. And then they don't really have a lot of time because they are working all the time, so they don't really have a lot of time to basically go out and do the things that they want to do all the time. So it's sort of this, so people are really, really busy and they're bogged down and everyone's kind of a slave to the Federal Reserve or the banking system, whatever you want to call it. And it, I think that sort of propels a lot of the depression. And so when you go into the social media, you're like, oh, because I can tell you, I see people go on there and I'm going, nobody has a job, like everybody's working, everyone's just on Facebook all day long, and because a lot of times it's the same people that you see over and over and over again, and you're like, wow, didn't I just see you on Wednesday, like and then you're still here, and you know what I'm saying, like, and I go, wow, but because I think a lot of these people are doing it from work, and
they have a desk job or an office job where they're on it.
Yeah, totally, and they're doing it from work. They're going, and they hate their jobs, and that's part of why they're depressed, in the first place, because they can't get out of it. It's a trap. They're totally enslaved to it, and then they don't like it, and so they find other ways to self-medicate, and that could be through social media, that could be through, alcoholism, that could be through other forms of drugs, it could be through prescription drugs. And there's lots of different ways that people do it, but it's numbing, a numbing effect, just so that they don't have to deal with their lives. And like you're saying, these people, and then they go on and they lie, or they create a false persona for the social media, but that's really just them trying to mask their depression, or mask the fact that they're unhappy with their real lives.
Excellent way. You put it way better than I just did. It took me like an hour.
No,
Trying to get better at that. Yeah.
Well, because, I understand what you're saying is, like, you don't want to necessarily say that, you don't want to necessarily offend them or try to put them down or anything for doing what they're doing, because we all have probably spent too much time on there every now and again. And why is it so addicting? I think that's one of the reasons it is so addicting, is because it does give you that opportunity to escape the mundane of your life, and then maybe put up a different persona, or kind of just look at other things, and maybe feel that you're connected, even though you're connected through the machine. So I don't know. There's a couple different perspectives on that. There was that video running around where the people were talking about or I think it's a documentary called The Invention of Loneliness. Do you remember that?
No, I haven't seen that.
I sent it to you. I'm pretty sure that I showed you the trailer of it, and it was about, but I don't know if the full-length movie has been up yet. I think they're doing a Kickstarter to try and raise the money to.
You know what? Maybe so. Or maybe I was just on Facebook and I was just too busy to watch it. I'm missing with you. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it was The Invention of Loneliness, and it was basically about how everybody is training themselves to be lonely, because they think that they're not lonely because they're socializing on the social networks, but then they're really lonely because they're not experiencing true connections. And so I put that up there, and I thought that was really profound. And then somebody brought up to me. She says, "Well, I have I've had many relationships. I've had husbands and family members and this and that." And she goes, and to be honest, there are people who I've met through social media that I've never met in person, that I actually feel like I'm more connected to and I'm closer to than I do the people that I've known in real life. And so I think there's, you can look at it from two different angles. Maybe there is some truth to that, because we're losing some of that, like we've talked about on our show, that empathy aspect, or you're losing some of that nonverbal communication, that connection that you could only get through meeting somebody in person, or you can get a little bit of it through talking to them. Mm-hmm. But you lose it when it's just all verbal on chat, Yes. And so you get a little bit of it when you talk to them, because you can hear their voice, and that adds an element of communication. And then when you see them, that's an even greater element of communication. Plus, it's this, not to sound new agey, but it's like an aura or a chakra or something that you feel their vibe, that's a connection that you don't get through. You obviously wouldn't get through a machine. You just wouldn't get that. Yeah. And so, you know, like, have you ever had you like somebody on the phone or like through media or something like that, and then you see them in person and then you don't like them, you know? And it's not necessarily just a physical attraction. It's like a smell or a vibe or a personality. It's just something like that. You're just like, oh, I just don't.
Or maybe even vice versa too, where you're not as into them and then you meet them in person and you're like, oh, I never, you know, saw this person. I never. Oh, they have this kind of energy, like you said, a pheromone, I don't know, a smell or something else. Yeah, it's very true. It's very yeah.
So we're losing a lot of that, and this documentary, The Invention of Loneliness, is trying to talk about that, all that we're losing, because we're, you know, your brain is on Facebook. You're not really connecting with other people. But she brought up the other side of it and said it's actually allowed her to connect to people who she wouldn't have normally, and maybe she would have been lonely in her own life because she had a husband and family members and things like that she didn't really feel connected to or didn't really get along with. So I don't know.
I would say though too, I have connected to more people that are kind of awake. I hate saying awake, but those are conscious. You know, they're really conscious of the world. Okay, I'll elaborate on conscious or awake. That are awake or conscious to the world and how it really works around them, because they're really invested in trying to find real solutions to their problems, as opposed to just listening to what the TV tells them is going on, or what the TV tells them they should do. So I have made friends through social networking and media all over the world, and when I've traveled, I've been able to maintain my relationships with friends because of social media. But I think that we're just talking about, as far as depression is concerned, that it does, you know, allow people to escape too, and just kind of like make their lives what they think other people want it to be.
Yeah.
You know, because they're unhappy about themselves. I'm on Facebook a lot. I just post things. So I really write what I'm doing. I'm not like, hey guys, I'm going to the park. I did a little bit when I first started, but I was over that, and I use it a lot to maintain contact with my friends when I was living overseas, and then now I just post pictures and stuff, and I post a lot of different things, and for me, because I get a lot of inspiration from seeing art and pictures and thought-provoking, so anything creative I'm doing, any music I'm writing and stuff, I do get, you know, ideas from looking at things that other people post, and I feel like I try to inspire people by doing the same, or posting, or inspire people to think about things, you know? Like I posted this, I found this great picture, I forgot where I found it, but talking about the media and how they don't care about Palestinians, and it's this great picture. It's like on one side of the picture, it's, you know, dead Palestinians, their heads blown off, they're dismembered and like just lying in puddles of blood. And then on the other side, it's just this little baby crying, and he happens to be Jewish, and the media is basically focused on him, and they're just ignoring all the dead, dismembered people. And I think, you know, stuff like that, there might be people that are offended by it, there might be people that relate to it, but, you know, I think I like to see stuff like that going around Facebook, too, as opposed to pictures of Kanye and Kim Kardashian's wedding, you know, that people look at too, which I think is frivolous. But, you know, it might make people uncomfortable, but I think sometimes, you know, people might come across these images. It might shake something up in them. It might make them think about stuff like that. So, you know. Yeah, that's a good point, too. You are able to do that. And I think you're right when you say you've met more people that are awake. I mean, I think that's where a lot of us have connected, is through social media, because, I mean, let's face it, in your normal matrix world, whatever you are, there aren't a lot of like-minded people. There just aren't. You know, they're hard to come by. You know, you feel out of place a lot of times when you're you as a teacher, and they're trying to teach, you know, global warming myth, or they're trying to talk about the official story of Oklahoma. I mean, you know, you feel weird because you know that that's not true, and you get, you know, and then most people in society, though, are just kind of going along with it, and they're not asking those kind of questions about those things. And so so that in and of itself can be kind of lonely, you know? Yeah, definitely. And that could be depressing. So at the same time, too, you connect with people online and you find people that are like-minded, and maybe it doesn't make you as depressed anymore.
Right. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is it can be kind of a double thing. Like, I think that there is that aspect of, like Louis C.K. talks about the absence of empathy, but then there's also the aspect of where you can meet people that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to connect with, and then that makes you feel less lonely because you do stand out in your own community. You can't talk to other people, and so I had the experience of feeling really kind of out of place when I first became a mother. Like, I don't know that many other moms, so then I had to go out and I had to meet other moms, and I had to join, moms clubs and things like that. And then I had and then when my son was diagnosed with autism, then I felt out of place with the moms, and then when I went to the autism mom groups, I felt out of place with them because they'd be talking about like medicating their kids and doing these things that I was not even going to do, and I didn't want to come across like I was judgmental. Yeah. So I ended up just kind of like not fitting in, I was like, I don't fit in anywhere. Everywhere I try to join, I get kind of, I'm just sort of, I stand out and I don't feel comfortable being myself. So when I found, this little family of people that you and I have sort of built around us, because we knew each other before that, and then we kind of woke up together, and then we sort of built this group around us of people, or, you met some people, and then I met some people, and then we kind of brought everybody together. And so, and those are our friends like Liam and Joni, and who we've had on our show before, but these people have become kind of our little group, or that is to replace that. So, and we don't see them because they don't live in our area. We don't see them all the time, and we don't even see each other, even though we both live in Southern California, but we're still far apart. Yeah. So, so I don't know. So I don't know why I got off on this tangent. I think it's just because I'm trying to play the devil's advocate on it, is that there is this side of it that's very depressing, but then there's also it can be empowering. It
can eliminate depression too.
It can eliminate some forms of depression, or it can disconnect you and make you connected at the same time, which is weird. It sounds like a contradiction, but it's true. I don't know how else to say it.
At the end of the day, it's your choice. Are you going to use this? See, the thing, because we talked about technology too. The thing about technology is it could be malevolent or benevolent depending on how you use it, right? And the thing is, when I talk about technology to some of my friends, or I talk about the possibilities of how it can be used in malevolent ways, people get like offended and they say, well, no, but we can do this and we can do that, and but I'm like, yeah, but these conversations aren't happening too, where they're not really, people aren't really thinking about the pros and the cons. They're just looking at the pros, and they want to look at technology as a way of, as evidence of our evolution. But at the same time, they don't want to acknowledge like the damage it's doing to the environment and to us, because, we are using radiation, and we have all these EMFs that are messing up, killing bats and bees, and eventually harming us, maybe not as fast, but, people don't want to have these conversations, but that's happening too, as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we as a species don't use a whole lot of self-control. We tend to, we don't. We get hooked on something, and it's like, and then we just want it to, or maybe that's a cultural thing in the United States, but we get so much abundance of it, and we just keep going and going and going with it, So it's like we get this technology, and we don't see the future foresight that it could cause all these problems. We don't see the problem with just using it till the end of time. It's like, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's interesting because I think that we are going to have to come to a point. We are coming to the point where we're going to have to really delve deep and think about why we're using these things, because eventually it's taking a toll on our health and our environment.
Anyway, so we went off on a tangent about technology and whatnot because we were talking about depression, and we think that some of these things are affecting our health. They are affecting our level of just our ability to be happy. But I mean, it's such a very layered, multifaceted thing. There's so many things that can make you feel depressed. And Craig does a really good job in his book kind of just talking about the many layers of things that he's been able to research and verify. So all this stuff that he talks about in his book is verifiable. He's, you know, there's been like scientific studies, like we love that term, but it's, you know, but he did a good job of carefully like showing the things that are provable in that way. So anyway, so without further ado, we're going to take a short break, and we get back. We're going to be talking to Craig Meriweather, Depression 180. Please stay with us.
Hello, thanks for having me on your radio. Even though we're not from a famous rock and roll band, if we were, even though we sound a little like we are, we'd definitely wear a Conspiracy Realist t-shirt, because they're gear, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're really gear. I want to write a song about them. Conspiracy Realist t-shirts at truthertees.com. I gotta think of the middle eight. Shop.truthertees.com. What does that mean? It's the internet. What's that? I don't know. It's a net. It's between things. Shop.truthertees.com. What's that? It's where you get Conspiracy Realist t-shirts. Oh, gear.
Hi, welcome back to Truth or Talk. On today's show, we're talking to Craig Meriweather. Craig has been described as a wake-up call, giving people the tools and information they need to energize and revitalize their lives, enabling them to end depression and create a life of happiness. Craig is the author of the best-selling programs Mind Mastery Blueprint and Depression 180, about which Wendy Love, creator and author of the award-winning blog DepressionGateway.com, says, "This is one of the best, most thorough books on depression I have read, and I have read most of them. It is the most thorough account of all the strategies you could possibly employ to manage depression." Craig is also a featured author in the New York Times bestseller books Pearls of Wisdom, 30 Inspirational Ideas to Live Your Best Life Now, along with Jack Canfield, Marcy Shimoff, I think, and Janet Atwood. He is also host of the popular blog talk radio show, The Mastermind Show, interviewing experts in mind, body, and spiritual transformation. Please welcome to the show, Craig Meriweather. Hi, Craig.
Hi, April. Hi, Christine. How are you?
Hi. Hey, Craig. How are you?
I'm doing great.
All right. So, you know, you tell a story about your own depression at the beginning of your book, and you were even to the point of suicide or, you know, going to commit suicide. So could you tell our audience about your experience and why you didn't go through with it? Thank God.
Yeah. Well, it was just one of those things where it was sort of like the that infamous frog in the pot of water that slowly gets heated up. You just, you know, don't really realize there's a problem until it's at the breaking point, and that's what kind of happened with me. I couldn't say there was anything super wrong with my life. Everything was okay, but that maybe was problem was things were just okay, and you know, you get to a point where you're kind of frustrated, you're disappointed that the dreams you had when you were 18 didn't work out, and I got to a point where I just like, you know, I'm tired of feeling miserable, I'm tired of feeling unhappy, and just not happy with my life. You know, it's a drudgery to get out of bed in the morning. And I don't know if you ever had that experience where you have a problem, you're looking for an answer to a problem, and you go to bed one night and you wake up in the morning and you got, oh, here's the solution to my problem. Well, I woke up one morning. I woke up one morning and I just had this idea of like how to kill myself. I thought, oh, this would be perfect. It wouldn't be messy, and it wouldn't be traumatic for other people, and I just thought, okay, that's it. And throughout the week, what really kind of terrified me about it was that I thought it was a really good idea. I thought, oh, here's a way to end this kind of vague misery that I'm dealing with, and it could just be over. And the thing that really stopped me was my son. This was my big why, is that I couldn't figure out how my son would probably go through his life without thinking it was his fault, how my wife would explain to him that, oh, your father leaving when you were very young had nothing to do with you. It was all his BS that he was trying to deal with. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe if he's my big why, maybe I could figure out a way to deal with what I'm going through, find ways of dealing with this depression. And I basically had three options. I could stay the way I was, which isn't a good option. I could take myself out, which was even a terrible worse option, or I could find my way out. And so the only logical solution was to find my way out. And so I spent all this time, it became this big self-help project. And I read every book I get my hands on. I went to every website I could find that talked about depression and ways of getting out of depression. Wasn't interested in dealing with medication. I knew some people who had been on medications for depression, and they just had miserable experiences. Wasn't interested in doing that, so I figured there's got to be other ways. And I just spent all this time working on it. And one day and it was some work. It was some work after, 25 years of feeling like this, of programming my brain, of feeling these feelings and these emotions and this brain chemistry of turning up this depression over and over again and programming that into my subconscious. It was some work to retrain my brain, literally. But after a while, I realized, it'd been a while since I've been depressed, and I've been feeling good for a while. And I was talking to my wife about it. I thought, this is cool. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling positive about life. It's not that all the problems are gone, but I know I can handle them now, and I can go through them. And I said, but I'm not really sure what to do. And I spent the last few years kind of working through all this stuff. And she says, yeah, but you now have this great toolbox, and you can start talking to people about it. Because if you're dealing with it, maybe the other people are too, and want a solution other than medication. And so I kind of started talking to people about it, and I was surprised at the amount of, people I knew. I'd written this book, and I'd read some articles on the internet, and people were starting to see these things, and people would come up to me I was picking up my son from school or whatever, and they'd say, oh, yes, I read that thing, and yeah, me too. And it was a lot of acknowledgments like, yeah, I've been going through the same thing, and I had no idea. These people I see on a regular basis, and, everybody's nice and pleasant and seems like everybody's doing fine, but they're not. And it was really surprising to me, just the people in my immediate circle, how many just kind of nodded their heads and go, yeah, going through the same thing. And so I figured, the more I can talk about it, then maybe, more people can at least get that spark of something can be done. You don't have to feel like that anymore. Yeah.
And you struggled for a really long time, as you talk about in your book, and it sounds like what the turnaround was this pinnacle where you were thinking of suicide and then couldn't figure out how to explain it to your son. So, but what caused your depression, or do you know what caused it?
I think it was the number of things. Unfortunately, depression isn't just one thing. And that's where medication kind of is an unfortunate, anti-solution, because depression is a check engine light. And unfortunately, like the check engine light, it doesn't tell you what the problem is. It's basically like physical pain. It's the mind trying to get the attention of the body that there's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And like that check engine light, you have to go through the process of trying to figure out what the problem is. So depression can be many, many things. It can be anything from a food allergy. It can be things like lack of vitamin D if you're not getting enough sunlight. It could be a brain injury. If you've been in combat, you've been in a car accident. And the interesting thing about brain injuries is it can show up a year later, 18 months later. If you're in a car accident and whacked your head against the windshield, or you had a rollover or anything like that, a year later you start feeling depressed and things aren't going right. Why would you ever relate that to the car accident you had a year ago? And there's a lot of things like that. They did a study about food allergies that's really interesting. They tried to find if food allergies can cause mental symptoms like anger, anxiety, depression, things like that. And, of course, they had the control group. They found that nothing happened with the control group, but in the other group where they actually tested food products, it was wheat, sugar, milk, and eggs were the top 4 items that caused mental symptoms like anxiety, depression, and anger. I mean, and that's breakfast for a lot of people.
Right.
Eggs, sugar, and wheat and things like that. So it could be your diet. It could be your not getting enough exercise. There's so many different things. And of course, this is not even getting into things like emotional trauma. things that may have happened 20 years ago, things that may have happened last week, post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. So it runs the gamut of everything from, what you're eating, what you're fueling your body with. Maybe you've had some sort of brain injury. Hey, your brain is like the consistency of like tofu, but your skull is a rock with ridges on the inside. So if you're sloshing that brain around, you're heading soccer balls, or you're playing football, or you're in a car accident, and you're knocking that soft tofu against this hard-ridged skull of yours, you can tear little pieces of your brain. You can start bleeding in there, maybe even get a concussion, and yes, that can cause depression. So it's a lot of different reasons, and that's the unfortunate thing. I can't just, and that's why it's so hard when you go into a doctor's office and you say, I'm not feeling right, things aren't going well, and say, okay, well, here's a prescription.
Right.
My mother-in-law just lost her husband of 47 years. And it was a lot of years of trauma. He was in and out of the hospital, and it was very taxing emotionally. And this happened in January, so over the last few months she's been dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of the stuff that she's had to hold back because she's trying to hold it together for her husband's sake, and dealing with the rest homes and the emergency rooms and the insurance forms and all this nonsense. Now it's coming out. And so she goes to the doctor, and she was having some kind of stress, anxiety issues, and we thought it might have actually be, maybe a mini stroke or maybe a tumor or something like this. And the doctor said, "No, it's probably not. It's probably stress. Here's a prescription for Prozac." And it's like, well, that's not the issue. The issue is she's dealing with this grief. She needs to talk to somebody. The insurance won't cover talking to somebody. The insurance will only cover Prozac. And so that's why these people are just writing scripts for Prozac, get them in and out. And it's not helping her. I mean, she's not taking it, but it's like she's had to go through other means to start talking to somebody. But it's like, that's not helping anybody. It's just getting people in and out so you can, have a nicer profit this quarter. And people aren't getting the help. And that's the thing. It's you're putting a little happy face sticker over the check engine light, and it doesn't help anything. Nobody's getting better. You're just masking the symptoms. While and if you do that with your car, eventually you're going to be on the freeway going 80 miles an hour, and you're going to conk out. And then what are you going to do? Then you're really screwed. And it's the same thing with this depression. You let it go long enough. God, when I track it back, I can see, I was probably getting depressed probably when I was in high school. I turned 47 this week. And it's like, that was a long time of not really noticing. And it wasn't like there were big warning signs. It's just like I didn't feel right. But I didn't know that's not the way you're supposed to feel.
Right.
I just, why wouldn't I feel like this? This is the way I feel, so it must be normal.
How did, but what did the world look like through your eyes when you were depressed? Because I've had my own experiences, and I'm just curious to know if you had the same.
Wow, that's a really interesting question. No one's ever asked me that before. That's a really good question. The world looked to me, it looked like the world was against me. And it just seemed like no matter how hard I tried, things didn't get better. And what was really kind of stupid about that way of looking at the world is it was actually the exact opposite. If you wrote it down in a pros and cons list or some sort of pie chart or something, you'd like, oh yeah, this guy's got a rockin' life. Look at the things that are going on. But when you're in it, it just looks like you magnify everything that goes wrong and ignore everything that goes right. I'm kind of in this weird situation now where my son's in this scouting thing, and so many things go right that everybody ignores, but the kind of few things that go wrong, people really highlight. Well, this didn't go right, and that didn't go right. It's like, well, look at all this stuff that goes right, and it was kind of the same in my life, in that, you keep focusing on the negative, and you're just going to see a lot of negative, and then why wouldn't you be depressed and angry?
Yeah. Did colors seem different to you? I felt like, for me, I don't know if this is weird, but I felt like colors seemed different for me. Like, just everything was duller. Like, duller in color, and everything was just kind of, like, slower, and, you know, my senses were as sharp and vibrant.
Dull, definitely. I don't get this, I don't recall the color thing. I do recall ignoring the beautiful things. Like we live in Flagstaff, Arizona, just a gorgeous, gorgeous town in a pinewood forest at 7,000 feet. And we get snow in the wintertime. We get the 4 seasons, and just a gorgeous town, right, kind of near the Grand Canyon. And there'd be days when you just don't notice it, and yet, kind of on the way to my house, we have a view of this beautiful, beautiful mountain peak, Humphreys, the San Francisco peaks, and it's just a gorgeous mountain range, and there'll be days where I just ignore it and not see it, and then one day, you know, sometime you just walk by, God, that's the most gorgeous view I've ever seen, driving home from work or picking my son up from school or whatever. I'm like, that's gorgeous, but, you know, most of the time I don't notice it. And it's kind of like that. You just don't see the beautiful, wonderful things when you're in that state. You're just focusing on the nastiness and the misery, and even if that's just like 2%, 5% of your life, you're ignoring the other 95%. You know, it just kind of blocks you. They've done these studies where they show pictures of funeral scenes and wedding scenes, and not morbid, but just, you know, funeral scenes and wedding scenes. And to the positive people, they claim that there are more scenes of the joyful weddings. And to the depressed people, they claim that there are more scenes of the despondent funeral goers, and they're the same amount of pictures. And so it's like your mental capacity really taints, filters what comes in. They did another one that was just recent where they asked people if they were lucky or unlucky, and when they answered, they hand them a newspaper, say, count all the pictures in this newspaper. And if you get it right, we'll give you $100. And to the lucky people, one of the pictures in the newspaper said, "Stop counting pictures. Just tell the guy that you read this ad and that you get the $100 right now." That was like the first or second picture. And the lucky people saw the picture, and the unlucky people who claimed that they're unlucky, most of them did not see the picture. You know, they just went on to count. And so it really does, your view of life really does filter in what you want to see. There was that wonderful book, Flow, by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he was saying, and he does all the math and the science behind it, but he was basically saying that our brain intakes about 2 million bits of information a second, but our conscious mind can only see basically something like 47 bits of information, and that's a lot of stuff to have to filter out. And so it really comes down to your subconscious programming. What is your subconscious going to allow your conscious mind to see? And if you're constantly looking for, it's like when you want that car, you're thinking of buying that new car, and so all of a sudden everybody's driving that car. My wife was talking about getting an Element. Hey, we should get one of those Elements. That's all I saw for like a month. Everybody in town was driving an Element. And it's the same thing. You program your mind. It's like, well, now the mind wants to see Elements, or the mind wants to see Priuses or whatever. So that's all you see. And then when you say, I read some reviews, I don't like that car, they're kind of expensive, they don't make them anymore, whatever, then your mind, okay, well, forget it, turn that off, we'll do something else. And so if you're programmed for depression, if you're programmed to be miserable, if you're programming yourself every day to be, just like riding a bike or learning to drive a car, or even learning to walk when you're like 12 months old, 14 months old, it took a lot of effort to do that stuff, a lot of concentration, until it became such a habit to walk, such a habit to ride your bike, such a habit to drive your car, that you don't think about it. You don't think, okay, pull keys out of pocket, put into door, put into ignition. You don't think about that. You just drive your car. It's automatic. Same with your emotional state, though. So what are you practicing for every day? If you're practicing to be angry at rush hour traffic, you're practicing to be miserable with your coworkers, are you practicing to be stressed out, are you practicing to be annoyed with your children? These are what you're practicing to become automatic habits, and that will filter in. So you won't see like you were saying, the colors will change. The beautiful things, the wonderful things in your life, you will not see. Those will be filtered out. So you will only filter in the miserable things in your life, even if that's maybe just a small, tiny little part of your life. That is what will be highlighted because that's what you're practicing for every day.
Craig, you talked a lot about some of the things that do cause depression, from the allergies or, is there any genetic component to it?
Well, genetics is really interesting because there's been a lot of debate about whether depression is a genetic thing, and that was one of the things that kind of helped me decide to get out of my depression, because I thought, well, if this is a genetic thing, and I've set my son up genetically to be depressed, started, programming him on how to react to the world with my own depression, modeling for him my behavior. I thought, well, here's an amazing opportunity to find some tools, so in case he ends up in this situation, I can help him out. The genetic thing comes around from studies with identical twins, and but scientists like to, when they're looking for something genetic, they like identical twins. They specifically like identical twins who were separated at birth and grew up in different homes. That way they can, it's not modeled behavior in the home. These are actually genetic things that happen. And what they found was that when one twin was depressed, the other identical twin who grew up in a separate home was depressed about 67% of the time. That's huge, considering about the national average, at least here in America, depression is about 12%, 15%. So that's huge, not 100%. So what it kind of explains, and then there's been some other studies that pretty much said that, there's no, boy, if I had it here, kind of got some notes in front of me. I don't know where I did with my genetic thing. Here it is. There was a study that was released in January of 2013, actually, and it was reported in Science News, so you can go to the website Science News and look this up. But it was published in the Journal of Biological Psychiatry, and the article stated that, and this is a quote from the Biological Psychiatry, says, a massive effort to uncover genes involved in depression has largely failed. By combing through the DNA of 34,549 volunteers, an international team of 86 scientists hope to uncover genetic influences that affect a person's vulnerability to depression, but the analysis turned up nothing. So here's, a massive scientific study, can't find any genetic link, yet you have this identical twin study that seems to indicate there's something there. So I would think that would say that you can be predisposed to depression, but it has to be triggered in some way. Triggered maybe by a parent who has struggling with depression, a head injury, a food allergy, or not taking care of yourself. So you may be predisposed to depression genetically, but it has to be triggered, it has to be turned on. You have to throw that switch in some way. So you're just not born depressed. You may be more inclined to depression than your neighbor, but you're going to have to work at it. And again, this comes to what are you practicing every day? Are you practicing to flip that depression switch? And it's something you got to look at. So genetics kind of can play a role, but it's one of those things you got to work on it. And it comes down to your lifestyle. What are you willing to work at in your life to make yourself emotionally stronger, mentally stronger? People think about diet, they think about let's go to the gym and work out on your body and build up muscle and lose fat and all that, but very rarely do I ever hear anybody, hey, let's work on the emotional side of things so it can be strong emotionally, so it can be strong mentally. When I do talks and things, I ask people how much of life is a mental game. I get back responses like, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90% of life is a mental game. It's like, well, how much time then are you working on the mental game? How much time do you spend every day before you get out of bed, before you go to work, before you hit that rush hour traffic to think, okay, I'm not going to let I know these situations and circumstances are headed my way. I know that annoying person at work is going to be there. I know that client that I don't like is going to call me today. I know I'm going to hit rush hour traffic because I'm running late. I know these events are coming to me. What am I doing to prepare myself for those? And plus, and most people don't do anything.
Do you think that there's some people that really don't, this might sound mean, but really don't want to get better or don't want to make an effort? Because I know there's this lady at my job that I work with, and she's a really nice lady. She's a bit older than me. And, she was just going through a lot. She was having some personal problems, and I was always, trying to cheer her up. And she would tell me, I'm overweight, or I'm this, or I'm that, and I always try to help give her solutions to her problems, but she would never,
part of my situation is I was comfortable in my, I don't know any different, and it's not until, that's why you have to hit that rock bottom, because you finally get to that point, it's like, okay, I am tired of this, but you have to get out of your comfort zone. And a lot of time, and to get out of the comfort zone, you're going to be uncomfortable, and people don't want to be uncomfortable. Even if that means staying comfortably miserable, you don't want to be uncomfortable. And losing the weight, and, unless you just have an epiphany and think, okay, I am going to get ripped, I'm going to get big muscle, this is my whole thing. You start going hard drinks and all these things. Until you have something like that, like I did, I don't think you're really going to change, because you're fine the way you are. The brain and the mind, I guess more like the mind, the subconscious mind, its job is not to make you happy or ecstatic or wonderful or enthusiastic. It's just there to keep you alive and to survive. And it knows you can survive in the state that you are, even if you're miserable. If you change, it doesn't know that you can survive that way. So that's why I think these people have these mountaintop experiences. You just have these wonderful experiences. Maybe they go to some workshop or something for a weekend, and they come back all jazzed or anything, but the body can't sustain that. You've gone too far out of your comfort zone, so you got to get pulled back. It's sort of like if it's a big pole, lamp post or a telephone is your state of being. You're tied to that pole, rubber, away from it and be okay. But if you move far away, that tension in the rubber band is going to fling you back to your comfort zone. And so you take a concerted effort of every day, just like going to the gym. You can't expect to go to the gym once or twice, pump some weights and get on the exercise machines and think, okay, I'm done. Why, now I'm healthy. Now I can go back the way I want to eat, and I can, just sit around and watch TV and drink beer, and everything's cool. No, it's like a lifestyle change. You got to change your diet. You got to change your exercise. You got to change your habits. You got to change all this stuff forever. And with emotional and mental game of things, it's like you can't keep watching the same TV shows. And here's the big one. The same people, and that's a difficult one to kind of try and people. So you're basically kind of a conglomeration of people you hang out with the most, and this has been proven with Framingham heart study. They've been doing for something like 40, 50 years. They're just going through the generations tracking heart disease, but they're getting all this other information, and a lot of it's lifestyle information. And what they found is that you're basically hanging out with the same people, weight, and around the same kind of health issues. You're around the same financial issues and around the same emotional issues. So if you're hanging around people who are whining and complaining and miserable, and the government this and the taxes that and the work and you're overweight and you're always broke, you're going to want to be around people. If you're miserable and buff, and happy all the time. You two do not coexist together in the same universe. So, I always remember thing about Tony Robbins, the personal development guru guy.
Yeah, I know Tony Robbins. I love him. Yeah.
Really amazing, and I love his stuff, and I always remember one thing he said, and he was talking about money, but I think this goes around to pretty much everything in life, but he was talking about he was stuck at, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but he was stuck making $2 million a year, and no matter how he only had $2 million. No matter what he did, no matter how many seminars he did, no matter how TV shows he did, whatever, he only had this amount of money. He was kind of talking about something. I don't understand it. I can't seem to break this level. I can't break this ceiling. I don't understand, no matter how hard I work. And the guy says, well, that's because you're probably only hanging around people who make $2 million. He's like, yeah, that's right. If you want to make $10 million, you need to hang around people who make $10 million. He's like, oh, so guess what? He started hanging around people because what do? They talk about how to make $10 million. They talk about what you do with $10 million. That's what they do. And so he started doing that, and the next year he made around $10 million. And so you look at that. If you started hanging around people who eat healthy, who talk healthy, who exercise, and do that kind of stuff, guess how that's going to affect you. And so you get healthy. If you got to start talking to people who make money, who talk about making money, how you make money, what you do once you have that money, what kind of investments you make, what kind of savings accounts, kind of CD, I don't know, whatever you do with that kind of money. If you start hanging around people who just are happy all the time and don't complain and don't whine and shrug off the kind of nonsense that happens in life, but just and look for the good in things, what's that going to happen to you? You got to look at what your friends, what do they have you watching? What do they have you reading? What do they have you thinking? And you got to ask yourself, is that okay? Is that where I want my life going? And you might have to make some serious changes in your life. They're not easy to do. I'll tell you that much. But how bad do you want your life to change? And are the people you're hanging around keeping you from achieving your goals? Can you even tell your friends what your goals are? Would they laugh at you? Yeah, and I know situations where maybe it's family members, and maybe you just got to make those family visits shorter and farther apart, or just come up with that list of, okay, here's the subjects we can talk about where we don't get into a fight or an argument. We can talk about these 3 or 4 things that I know will be safe. And we'll cut it instead of a whole weekend. We're just going for the day, and we're only going twice a year now, and that kind of thing. I don't know. And this is where like a mastermind group comes in really handy. I think the most significant changes in my life really happened after I put together with a couple of other people this mastermind group that we'd meet once a week or every other week, and we just sit down and we'd talk about it. Was kind of businessy, but we'd also talk about family and other issues, and we were kind of working on kind of the same kind of stuff together in different ways, but we were all compatible, and we started talking together, and I think the most significant changes in my life happened the fastest once I started my group and having the supportive, encouraging people around me, because sometimes it's that one pair of eyes on the outside that says, well, if you just tweak it like this, or you just do it like this, or maybe if you look at it this way, and it's like, oh, yeah, of course. My filter was keeping me from seeing it like this. Okay, I get it, and I can, change it and move on now. And so, God, the people you hang out with are a huge, huge influence. I mean, if you could work on that, up your exercise and kind of look at your diet and deal with, start eating more healthy, that'll do so much to change how you look at the world, your happiness levels. And then if things are still, maybe not working out, so then you look at some other things. Well, maybe do I have some issues in my past that I need to deal with, or maybe could that car accident a couple of years ago have affected the way my brain is working, or something like that. So, I'm going on and on.
No, this is great. I'm so glad to hear you talk about the whole lifestyle change, especially when it comes to people, because I think that's huge. It's huge for a lot of people. Huge in the fact that they don't want to make that change because they know that's what they have to do. They don't want to let go of their friends or their family members. But I think it makes a huge difference. It's so you're spot on. I think.
so much easier to take a pill.
Mm-hmm.
And we're busy people. You know, there was this interesting thing about the Japanese where some of the Japanese workers are there's even a name for it. They're actually dying from overwork. And
yes, I know that. I'm sorry. Go on. I lived in Asia, and I heard of. Anyway, go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You looked it up on the internet; it'd be there somewhere. But especially in Japan, like they're working so hard for so long that these young men are just keeling over. And the only thing the doctors can think, well, he worked himself to death. And apparently, like, the only nation that works longer and harder than the Japanese are Americans. And so you think about, how are we dealing with this stress? It's like, well, we're overeating, we're drinking too much, we're watching too much TV, we're playing these violent video games. And, you know, it's affecting our lifestyle. And, you know, of course we're unhappy and miserable and depressed. I was thinking, and who has the time to look for new friends and put together a mastermind group and I got to get the kids out to school, and if I just took this pill, maybe I could make it through the day. And it's just we need that convenience, and unfortunately, that's not gonna fix the problem. Only a lifestyle change is really going to. What is it? Wayne Dyer said, if you want to change some things in your life, you're going to have to change some things. So it's, you know, you just gotta find a way, and that's again where the mastermind group comes in, where people can help you make that, you know, that shift and give you ideas and encouragement and support. So.
Yeah. The Japanese word is karoshi. It means like death from overwork. That's what you're thinking about, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm just curious because you're talking about the lifestyle change and how hard that is for people to make. So I would assume that because people don't want to do that, it's easier. They think it's easier to just pop a pill, right? So what are antidepressant drugs basically, and what do they do, and are they a good choice?
Well, okay. So antidepressants have been around since, I think, the 1940s, 1950s. They've been working with that. But back in the late 80s, I think it was 87, I think the FDA approved the selective serotonin uptake inhibitors, SSRI type of antidepressants. And then I think in 88 it was that Prozac was released. Now, basically what happens, let me give you a quick little 2-minute biology class here. In your brain, you have brain cells, and brain cells communicate to each other by reaching out this little arm called an axon. And the axon reaches out to another brain cell, and through this little arm comes a little electromagnetic signal. And at the end of this arm, the electromagnetic signal turns into a chemical called a neurotransmitter. And it kind of mists around the other, doesn't actually touch the other cell, but it kind of, the arm just kind of sends this mist around the other cell, brain cell. And that chemical is used as a message, as a signal for that brain cell to do something, either create an action or pass the message along or both. And each cell can have tons of these little arms all going in all different directions, connecting. And this is happening. Gives that message. It makes this mist of this brain chemical, this neurotransmitter. It gives too much. So what it does is back all the excess back up into the axon and back into the descending brain cell. So it uptakes is what it's called. So it vacuums all the excess back up, and then it goes on and does other stuff. What a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor does, it prevents that brain cell from vacuuming back up the serotonin. Now, serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It's a brain chemical that is linked to happiness, to good feelings, to well-being, and a lot of other things. It works with digestion and sleep and other things, but it's mainly kind of for being the happiness chemical. So a selective serotonin inhibitor prevents from back up. So what it's doing basically is fogging your brain with excess serotonin. And the point of that is it's supposed to make you happier. Now, there's a few problems with that, and this is what I put in the book, and this is what I talk about. everything I talk about is coming from science. If I read something about depression or a depression cure and I couldn't find any science to back it up, I didn't put it in the book, I don't talk about it. So this is all coming from science. Now, there could be a problem with that cell not being able to reuptake, to vacuum back up that serotonin, the lady's name. But there was a study done, and this lady found that 50% of the people on antidepressants were actually more depressed. It's Dr. Renee Henn. And this was in the journal Neuron. And what she shows is that antidepressants can actually decrease the amount of serotonin in the brain. And what she found was that the more antidepressants try to increase serotonin production, the less serotonin people actually produce. So there must be a reason why that brain needs to vacuum back up that serotonin. And the other issue with antidepressants is they have such nasty side effects. And there's so many, and this is the reason why I felt like I didn't want to take them, is there's so many nasty things are going on, and they could kind of be addictive, and people kind of get that numb feeling about them. The other issue that I had with the serotonin reuptake is serotonin doesn't really seem to be linked with depression at all. There was a study in Sweden back, I think it was 1976, and they looked at people, their serotonin levels in depressed people and in a control group of people who were happy and not depressed. And what they found is that 29% of the depressed people had low levels of serotonin, 47% had regular levels of serotonin, and 24% had high levels of serotonin. The control group was almost exactly the same. So it would think to all the scientific community that serotonin levels have nothing to do with depression, and yet right after that they started making medications or started researching medications to increase serotonin and increase happiness. But there's a lot of books, a lot of research, especially with Dr. Irving Kirsch and his book, The Emperor's New Drug, Exploiting the Antidepressant Myth, about how the drug companies kind of pushed all this through the FDA, how they were hiding a lot of the information that showed that placebos work as well as the antidepressants do, which is wild. Usually antidepressant, or when doing a clinical trial, you always have a placebo, you always have a control group. You know, you're getting 20-30% of the people get better on the placebo. With antidepressants, it's exactly the same ratio. In fact, there was one study that showed that 82% of the patients got better with the placebo. So it's kind of a weird thing. There's a lot of research out there. There's actually a study published by the Public Library of Science. This is a direct quote from the study. You can find this in The Myth of the Chemical Cure by Dr. Johanna Moncrief. But this is what it says. It says, these findings suggest that compared with placebo, the new generation antidepressants do not produce clinically significant improvements in depression. And so the science is out there. You know, and it's just kind of weird that, and again, it's that pop in the pill, that it becomes easier. But, you know, some of these side effects are nasty. It's like dry mouth, uncontrollable facial and body tics. This is coming from the manufacturers of these drugs. This is what they're telling you can happen. Insomnia, weight gain, anxiety, nausea, diarrhea, abdominal pain, sexual dysfunction. Something like 74% of the people who take antidepressants have sexual dysfunction, blurred vision, headaches, hallucinations. This is a great quote from The Essential Guide to Psychiatric Drugs. This is a book produced, I think it was back in the early 90s, by Dr. Jack Gorman, MD. He's a full-on doctor who loves, well, I would say love, but he's a doctor who prescribes medications. And this is just a book for the layperson. If you got a prescription, this is what the drugs are about. And he's a pro-drug guy. And this is what he says about Paxil, an antidepressant. Direct quote from the book. He says, except for weight gain, sexual problems, and withdrawal effects, side effects of Paxil are usually mild and very much the same as those of Prozac or Zoloft. The most common are nervousness, insomnia, shakiness, and upset stomach with nausea, diarrhea. Those are the side effects saying that are drug will do for you if you take it. And it's just kind of bizarre. The other really kind of unfortunate thing that maybe people have heard about is the fact that it may increase suicidal behavior in children and adults. And it got so bad that all these studies that were coming out that showed that this was happening, and they'll try to, when you see it on the news or something, say, well, it's only like a small percentage, but it's like, well, I don't know. It just seems like somebody's if this is an issue, maybe it shouldn't be on the market. But basically, the FDA had to put a black box warning on all antidepressants, and a black box warning is the final step before a drug is pulled from the market. And basically what the FDA said, this happened in 2004, the FDA declared that antidepressants double the risk of suicidal behavior in children and adults under 25. And the risk is just slightly less in adults over 25. And
when you see events like school shootings or like all of these like bizarre killings, do you correlate those with the use of antidepressant drugs?
Yeah, there's a book, the Depression Guidebook. I actually have 5 pages of it all correlated. There's a wonderful site. Now I can't remember. That talks there's a lot of these shootings, if not all of them. The people are on antidepressants, and this is what it reads, the black box warning. It says the increased risk of suicidal thinking and behavior in children, adolescents, and young adults taking antidepressants for major depressive disorder and other psychiatric disorder. It doesn't talk about the children. This isn't new. They were looking at this back in 1990. There was one study done by Dr. Martin Tisch and Jonathan Cole, and they were published in the American Journal of Psychiatry. What was interesting about these guys is they're both Harvard Medical School psychiatrists, and Dr. Cole had actually done research on Prozac for the company, the manufacturer Eli Lilly. And this is what they said, is they reported that Prozac could induce intense, violent, suicidal preoccupation, and they chronicled a number of patients who became severely anxious, agitated, and obsessed with violence in 2 to 7 weeks after beginning Prozac. So yeah, it's definitely, something that seems to be swept under the rug. Again, this is again from the Essential Guide to Prescription Drugs. This was 1992, and this is a full 12 for the FDA's black box warnings. This is what the Essential Guide to Prescription Drugs said about Prozac. A review of the relevant literature reveals that the development or intensification of suicidal thoughts and treatment, regardless of the severity of depression, has been documented repeatedly for many antidepressant drugs in wide use. It is apparent that suicidal thinking may emerge during treatment with any antidepressant. This is that guy who's a kind of a pro-drug doctor. This is what he's saying. 4 years the introduction of Prozac, 12 years before the FDA finally had to put their black. And it's just scary stuff that, you got 10 minutes with your doctor, he's not going to explain this to you. The other thing that, since we talked about the school shootings, there was actually another study. This was done by the Institute for Safe Medication Practices and the Department of Psychiatry at Cambridge Hospital at Harvard Medical School. This was actually published in Time magazine, and so if you want to look up the top pharmaceutical drugs linked to violence on Google, an article will pop up from Time. Pharmaceutical drugs linked to violence. Number 1 is this called Chantix. It kind of helps cravings for smoking. For violence. Number 2 is Prozac. Number 3 is Pac. Number 4 is amphetamines used to treat ADHD, including Ritalin, Adderall, Dexedrine. 5 is something for malaria. 6 is Strattera, another ADHD drug. Number 7 is a drug for insomnia. Number 8 is Luvox, an antidepressant. Number 9 is Effexor, antidepressant. And number 10 is Pristic, an antidepressant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of the top 10 pharmaceutical drugs linked to violence we give to children. So,
oh my God.
There is something to be said why these kids are going insane. They're having problems as kids have problems. We want a kid, going through puberty and going through that growth, that mental and emotional growth, and we're not helping them through it. We're just masking the symptoms, and so eventually they don't know how to process this. We're giving them drugs that cause violence, that even the pharmaceutical companies say cause violence, that side effect you need to look for. And then we scratch our heads and wondering why did this kid do that?
Right.
It's a strange world we're living in. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it is indeed. And do you find, having said all that, it seems really unlikely that there's ever a time where somebody would want to take these drugs. But is there ever a case where it's just somebody just cannot function without it, and so they just end up having to take it, or they find it to be necessary?
Look, if I get in a car accident, take me to the hospital and put me into triage. If there's I'm like I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. We're dealing with issues, people having schizophrenia, people having all sorts of serious issues. But the problem I see is that 1/3 of women walk out of the doctor's office with a prescription for an antidepressant, even if they walk in wanting one.
Wow.
Yeah. There's some issues where somebody may need medication to deal with that, because you're feeling blue and not right with the is not one of them. So, or your kid. It's just, are we ignoring our kids to the point where Johnny has a problem, let's throw some medication in his mouth and see if, and go on about our day. And again, it comes to that point of, we're busy. And I don't think people are trying to be mean or their children. But, mom's working, dad's working, we're irritated ourselves and frustrated and disappointed, and things aren't going well in our lives, and having trouble at school, and the doctor, he's wearing a white coat, he has a fancy degree on his wall, says that this is going to help.
Mm-hmm. And so, go ahead.
And what's a parent to do? It's like, well, this is the authority. This is what the guy says to do. I don't have the 15 hours to research this.
Right.
I just need this problem to go away. And, I don't know. And obviously it works for some people.
Right.
Otherwise, if you had, 100% of the people just going, not working, then these drugs wouldn't be on the market. But for some people, they seem to work, or at least they handle the side effects well enough, or they feel better. Who's the newscaster that was on antidepressant? Was it Tom Brokaw, or I don't want to say somebody's name who was wrong. It was one of those newscasters, and he said it was like the best thing that ever happened to him when he got. And it's like, well, you get people like that who say stuff, but if it doesn't work for you, then you think maybe there's something wrong with you. Because I just feel numb and I don't feel anything, and now I have all these other issues that that they're going to give me medication for, to deal with the diarrhea, to deal with the sexual dysfunction, to deal with the headaches, and so you just end up compounding issues by taking more and more medication. I think it was Jerry Lewis, the comedian actor, was on so much medication for just others. He's saying this medication for back, he had a back injury, which then caused this problem, and he was so addicted to all this stuff, so over medicated, that he had to spend a couple of years getting off all that stuff. And like I say, you may need some medication to help you with some issues, but like I say, feeling out of sort, the mental emotional game probably isn't one of them. So
yeah.
And given that it's so apparent that there's so many side effects, because even if you watch television, they talk about they have these drug ads and they tell you what it's supposed to treat, but then the myriad of side effects often sound worse than what they're treating. Or in some cases, like you mentioned, we talked about the suicide and the increase of aggression or suicide or depression even. So it's like it's counterproductive to what it's actually trying to treat. So why is it that, why are doctors still doing it? Why are they so readily sending these out? Why is 1 in 3 women walking out with a prescription? It just seems like a lot, given that we know that it doesn't really help as much as they're saying.
I don't know. And they're trapped in a situation. Insurance, there are 3 appointments with a counselor. Mm-hmm. You know, that's not going to help. 40 years and 3-4 years of this horrendous going to hospital, watching her husband die. But he thinks they're just going to get to know each other in 3 visits. Insurance doesn't want to pay for it. It's expensive. Giving you a $4 pill is cheap. And,
gotcha.
You know, and the doctor, imagine how you can keep up with all this stuff. The salesman comes into your office and he says, here's the deal. This stuff works. We have the studies to prove it. Here are the studies. And the other studies, you know, that show placebos work as well. They show them the good studies. And to get on the FDA, you only need something like 2 studies. If you have 14 studies and 12 of them show that this thing doesn't work, but 2 of them do, you just show them the 2 studies, and you got your drug in. And you know, there's a whole other show, the revolving door of the FDA of you know, a drug company becoming officials at the FDA for a few years and then rotating back into the drug companies, and everybody has to take their turn. So yeah, it's just basically it comes down to it's your responsibility. It's your life. It's your responsibility. And it's not your doctors. It's not your parents. It's not the government. It's your responsibility. Your well-being, your emotional health, your mental health is your responsibility. And a lot of people think that, you know, it's to happiness and to descend from heaven like a wonderful mist. And it doesn't work that. You have to, like I say, 60, 70, 80, 90% of the mental emotional game life is a mental emotional game. How much time you spend on that a day? And it's your responsibility, just like to the gym or eating right or whatever, your responsibility. The universe or God or the government or your parents aren't going to do it for you. They can tell you, eat better and exercise and all that. You're the one who has to do it. And same with mental and emotional well-being. It's up to you. Who are you hanging around? What movies are you watching? Who are you complaining all day long? Are you getting frustrated at rush hour traffic, even though you know you're going to be in rush hour traffic? You know, and so it's just up to you. And this is where the work is. You know, this is where doing the books and listening to shows like yours and getting the information and going in deeper. And this is just like for the iceberg stuff on this. It was a lot of work for me. And I'm happy to, you know, throw it people's way, but it's, you know, that's about all I can do for you, is give you the tools, hand you a toolbox, but I'm not building your deck for you, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like, you know, you just have to do the work yourself. That's a good way to describe it. I can give you the tools, but I can't build your deck for you. So, and there's a lot of ways it sounds like you can do it, and I think some of the ones you touched on were like just a healthy lifestyle. It's a good place to start, just eating right and exercising and just sort of, you know, trying not to sweat the little things all the time, like rush hour traffic. I mean, if you know it's going to be there, why are you getting so upset about it, you know? It's like an anticipated thing. So any other things that kind of jump out at you as what we can do to stay mentally healthy and so we can prevent ourselves from ever having to go on any of these drugs or getting to that level where we feel suicidal?
Yeah, they give you a few things. I'll just run down. This is stuff you need to write down. First off, the biggest thing you can do is exercise. There's been 100 studies, and probably by now maybe over 150, 200 studies that show that regular exercise can reduce depression. And one that showed that moderately intense aerobics, you know, just like going on a treadmill or a stationary bike, it decreased depressive symptoms by almost 50%. So gotta exercise, and we're such a stationary people. We lie in bed, we get up, we sit for breakfast, we sit in our car so we can sit at work, so we can sit in our car so we can come home and sit in front of the TV. We're not exercising. Find a time. This is, again, where a great mastermind group comes in handy. You meet your friends for Thursday at lunch, or Wednesday at the gym to take that class, or Saturday mornings to take a walk around the park with ride bikes or something. Because you'll show up for a friend when you won't show up for yourself. So get some people together. Have fun. 70% of all depressed patients responded to an exercise program in another study. So food is another big one. Remember what I said. The 4 food allergies related to mental symptoms, the 4 biggest ones were wheat, milk, sugar, and eggs. That's breakfast. So back in the early 1900s, this is an interesting statistic, we consumed about 3 teaspoons of sugar every day, and that was mostly from fruits and vegetables. Today, we're averaging about 58 teaspoons of sugar a day, and a lot of artificial kind of stuff, high fructose corn syrups and things like that. And basically, out of the 58 teaspoons, we're burning off 20. So 32 teaspoons of sugar that we don't know what to do with. And what's interesting about those artificial sweeteners, aspartame is the number one complaint the FDA gets on aspartame is that it causes depression. So you got to watch what you put on. But what I want to do is give you a handful of supplements. These are things you can find at your health food store in town. You probably find them on the internet. There's a vitamin store on the internet. But these are supplements. You don't need a prescription. You just buy them off the shelf like you do your vitamin C or your multivitamin. One is called 5-HTP for 5-hydroxytryptophan, and this is a natural occurring item in your body. You need tryptophan to create it, and if your body's not getting enough tryptophan, that's the thing in turkey that supposedly makes you sleepy. If you're not getting enough tryptophan in your system, your body can't make 5-hydroxytryptophan. And if you don't have enough 5-hydroxytryptophan, your body cannot make serotonin, which you might recall was one of the things that helped create well-being and happiness in your life. So you can actually get this 5-HTP as a pill, as a supplement, and from your health food store. A study showed 99 patients who had been severely depressed for an average of 9 years, almost half achieved complete recovery while others experienced significant improvement. This is what the lead researcher, Dr. J.J. Van Heil, said about 5-HTP. He said, quote, "I have never in 20 years used an agent which, 1, was effective so quickly, 2, restored the patient so completely to the persons they had been and their partners had known, and 3, was so entirely without side effects." So that was a big one for me, 5-HTP. I know some people it doesn't work for them. That was a godsend for me. You could feel the darkness lift. When that stuff, my wife would just hand it to me when I was just like, I couldn't function. Like, here, take these, please. Another one's GABA. It's butyric acid. That's a great one for anxiety as well as depression. SAMe, S-A-M-E. SAMe is a capital S, capital A, capital M, little e. This is has antidepressant qualities. They've been well researched. It was actually on the cover of Newsweek a bunch of years ago. A study published in the American Journal of Psychiatry found SAMe a, quote, safe, effective antidepressant with few side effects and rapid onset of action. One thing about the SRI, Prozac, things like that, it may take like 4 or 6 weeks for you to actually start seeing results. Low vitamin D. 75% of Americans have either deficiencies or borderline vitamin D deficiencies. So people are not getting enough sunlight. You need about, where you live, of the equator, you need about half an hour to an hour of direct sunlight, full body sunlight at noontime. That means standing in your bathing suit, your underwear, getting a tan. A lot of people don't have the time or want to do that due to potential melanoma or skin cancer. We're slathering on the sunscreen when it's summertime. We're wearing long sleeves and hats and things. It's wintertime, so vitamin D. You can take vitamin D supplements. You get that in your health food store. You take it in liquid or pill form. Another thing is getting a light box. These are things that you can find on the internet. If you go to depression180.com/lightbox, it's a big thing about different articles about light boxes. But this is another godsend for me. My wife found. Thank God for my wife. But, just a local drugstore. I think it was like a missed shipment because I'd never seen them there before. I've never seen them there afterwards. But she bought it. It was like $30. It's a full spectrum bulb. When our incandescent bulbs and our fluorescent lighting doesn't have the full spectrum, when the sunlight goes through a prism, you see the rainbow. That's full spectrum. Do not contain that. That's what we need. We need that sunlight full spectrum. So these bulbs are specifically created. to have the full spectrum. And boy, the first few times I turned that thing on and sat in front of it, you have to be about 12, 24 inches away. So you got to do it when you're reading a book or sitting doing some work. I felt like I had drunk 3 cups of coffee. It energized me. It was so good. I still turn it on and during the winter times when I'm feeling de-energized and feeling low. Wonderful thing. Lightbox, the specific one I haven't plug anything, but the specific one I have is called the Happy Light. Just kind of Google Happy Light or Lightbox. You'll find information about it. It costs, I don't know, $30-$40. Yeah, you can find ones that are $200. But it was amazing. Between that, the Lightbox, and the 5-HTP for me, that's what really knocked it out of the park. And then I could start working on my issues, dealing with some of the stuff that happened that really, started this thing off. Exercise, eating right, Lightbox, 5-HTP, or some of these other supplements. Then I could, work on the deeper stuff. Getting a coach is always great. Baseball players, they have 3-4 coaches running, hitting, catching, throwing, nutritional coach. There's not one person, a business person, an actor, a musician, sports player who does not have a coach to get them to a point where they can play better. Look at what happened to Tiger Woods, the golf player. He lost the mental game, and it took him a while to get it back. So if I don't know if he was working on that stuff, maybe he was, but it took him 2-3 years to finally kind of deal with the mess he made of his family. He didn't all of a sudden know how to swing a golf club, or his cha-cha lessons were messing up his hips or something. He made a mess in his life. He lost the mental edge. And I don't know, it didn't seem like he was getting any coaching because it took a long time for him to kind of get it back, and he's still kind of there and there. So coaching, just not only on the physical stuff, but because you think, oh, well, I can get a coach to lift weights or get my golf game or something. But the mental, emotional game, why not? So build your team. Writing is such a great way to deal with stuff, too. There's something about taking pen to paper. It connects the right brain and the left brain. And so you get this whole brain thing going. Just start writing, just stream of consciousness.
And music too. If you can get into music, that's really healing as well, I think.
It's just up, happy music. When I flip that on, that's like, okay, when I'm feeling I need that boost, there's some upbeat songs that get me going. Yeah. So that was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work that people need to do, but it's worth it. I think that what you're describing is mostly just a good life.
Good.
Just having a good life, giving yourself the opportunity to have a good life. So, well, thank you so much for being on our show today. We are just about out of time here, but it's been a pleasure, and we really recommend people go and check out your book. So, if you could, before you go, remind everybody how they can find you, find your book, and the work that you're doing.
Probably the best for the depression stuff. The best way is just depression180.com. It's depression180.com. To see everything I'm doing, the best way is craiginreallife.com. So CRAIG in reallife.com. It's the best way to find everything that's going on.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you so much once again. And Racine and I are going to take a short break. When we get back, we'll close out the show. But we thank our guest, Craig Meriweather. And, thanks for being on, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Rover, I so appreciate you having me on, and you're doing such good work, and so I appreciate being able to be a part of that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it's our pleasure. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
I was on holiday with Sir Lawrence Olivier. We had decided that 9/11 was an intelligence operation. We'd all known about JFK. He had so many mistresses. The CIA shot him. Castro could never have done it. It was clear. We had become realists, conspiracy realists. How would we let everyone know was the question. We decided to buy T-shirts that told the contents of our hearts and minds to the world. We went to shop.truthertees.com. Even though the internet hadn't been invented at the time, we went to shop.truthertees.com. There we purchased Conspiracy Realist T-shirts, one of a kind, sold only at shop.truthertees.com. shop.shop.truthitees.com. 100% cotton in men's and women's fitted sizes. I won't tell you which one I'm wearing.
Welcome back. Thanks for listening to Truth or Talk. Hey, Christine, what's going on?
Yeah, that was really good. I didn't answer your question. Nothing. Something. We just interviewed Craig Meriweather, and very interesting interview, very telling interview.
Yeah, it's these interviews that we do that are so inspiring, because then you hear these stories about people who, you know, get cancer or get sick or get depression, like in the case of this interview, and there seems to be no way out, but then they come on and they say, well, no, you know, there was a way out, and I did this, I pulled myself out of it, and that's a pretty amazing story how he was on the verge of suicide and then just pulled himself out of it.
Yeah.
And now it's done. And it's telling his book, Depression 180, because he literally did that for himself.
Yeah, you know, and especially with the death of Robin Williams, or the suicide of Robin Williams, it's really, really telling, because I know, like, my there's some members and some friends, some members of my family and some friends, and you were like talking about that, and they were saying, well, you know, I don't really have. There's some people that said they didn't really have sympathy for somebody that committed suicide, you know, because it's such a big taboo, and I think that there are a lot of people that don't really understand how somebody can get to that point. There's so many reasons and so many ways. But, you know, when he's talking about just, you know, he seemed like he was kind of almost out of body.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think he used the words out of body, but he, you know, it seemed like it was something that was really kind of like beyond his control, like he really wasn't the steward of his own body, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. And there's just been such a stigma attached to suicide, especially when you're talking about like religion, you know, or because of religion, you know, that especially I know in the Catholic religion, I was raised Catholic. I don't practice it now, but I was raised Catholic, and that's like the worst crime you can ever commit, is like to kill yourself.
Really?
Yeah. It's the worst. It's worse than murder. I even have a friend that was telling me in Romania that when you kill yourself, they put you by the fence. Your body's not allowed to be with the rest of the bodies in a graveyard. They put you by the fence, so everybody knows that you've killed yourself. So you shame your family too by doing that, not only yourself. So
that's pretty horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's kind of insult to injury. I mean, you have. I mean, here you are grieving the loss of somebody, and then you have to be shamed on top of it.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah, that's terrible. So, I mean, I wish that people would really, you know, take a look into depression and what causes people to kill themselves. And even, you know, with the suicide of Robin Williams, I've seen people making the same comments, saying, well, he killed himself. And, I mean, I had a family member to kill themselves, and they did it because they were physically suffering and in pain. You know, they had brain cancer. It kept coming back. They were being, you know, they were losing their dignity. They were in a lot of pain. I understand that. I don't, like, I mean, I don't know what I would have done if I was in that situation. Maybe I would have done the same thing. God forbid if that, you know, that ever happens. Who knows, you know? But there are people, I think that maybe they want to live, but I think in their mind, what they're going through is more painful than living, than dying. They'd rather just die. You know, and I've even had a couple friends too that were, you know, that suffered from depression, that tried to kill themselves or either thought about killing themselves. They've all said the same thing. When I've asked them about it, they said that, you know, they thought it was more, you know, killing themselves would take away the pain that they were going through. You know, because this is what people are thinking. They're thinking, I'm in pain. I just want to end it. You know, I just want to end it. Nothing can help me. Nothing can save me. There's nobody that can do anything for me. And this is the only solution that I have. So,
I've known people, or I knew somebody who killed himself, and you know, I didn't know him well enough to know all the reasons that were behind it, but with this case with Robin Williams, I mean, I've heard that too, and some people are kind of angry with him, and some people, this one guy who, I like his blog, and I follow his writing. His name is Matt Walsh, and I think he used to have a radio show. I don't know if he still does. He's written some really good stuff about homeschooling and about, and he's very much into taking personal accountability, which I dig that. I like that. You take personal accountability for your actions, and so he'd written an article about Robin Williams right after this had happened, saying that he had made a choice, and he didn't really respect his decision. And I was kind of like, well, I see that point. I mean, I don't think that we should sit here and glamorize or act like because a celebrity kills himself, like it's a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't know all the details of what was going on in his mind, and he was a very decent person. I mean, not only was he a genius as far as his comedy, his ability, he was a comedic genius. No one can deny that.
And dramatic, too. He was just all around amazing.
And he was a phenomenal dramatic actor, and he had he was just really talented, but he was just a decent person. And, he lived in San Francisco, which is where I grew up, and, you knew about him, you heard stories about him. He went to, his son was in my brother's Little League baseball team, and, so and he was just a nice guy. I mean, he didn't come in there and start acting like Robin Williams. He came in there and just was a dad and watching the baseball game, and most of the time people left him alone. If they did come up to him and start talking to him, it's usually the kids, and then he would be very gracious and sign autographs and things like that. You could see him at the grocery store. You could see him at the video store. He loved to go to the video store. And down on the 9th and Irving, there's this famous video store called Love Video. Do you remember that place, or had you ever frequented when you lived there?
Love Video.
Love Video.
No. I'm trying to recall it. No.
This place had every movie you could think of. I mean, if you were looking for an opera, that had anything that had ever been recorded, it had everything. It was really famous for that. And so, all the workers who worked there all had stories about him coming in, and then he would talk to people, and he was just really nice. And he had, my mom was friends with this woman who worked for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and she said that they had scheduled Lance Armstrong to come into the Children's Hospital in San Francisco, and he didn't come. He didn't show up. So they called Robin Williams, because Robin Williams used to go there just because, not because they asked him to. He would just show up and entertain for the children, just on his own volition. So they knew him, his number. They knew him personally. So they called him up and said, "Can you fill in?" Lance Armstrong didn't show, and he was friends with Lance Armstrong. Robin Williams was, and he did. He came in and he showed up, and so he's just a decent person like that. And then I recently read this article. This lady who did promotions for celebrities, or she did not promotions, but she ran a venue. So the venue would have a certain set of demands when they would have a celebrity performer. The celebrity would come in and say, like you hear the stories about, I want a bowl of all green M&Ms or something like that. Like stuff like that, weird stuff like that. And she said that, and she even commented, she said there's one celebrity, and she didn't name who it was, but I was very curious as to who it was. But she said that it was a celebrity who came in and who was a known environmentalist, but insisted upon coming to the venue in a gas-guzzling private jet, but then would show up to the event in like a hybrid.
I bet she was like Leonardo DiCaprio.
I know, that's the first person I thought of too. I was like, oh my god, what a dick. But I'm thinking, I don't know what kind of event he would be performing for, but maybe, but she said
maybe I'm wrong. Forgive me.
No, or maybe it was an award show. That could be too, because it could be a venue that did award shows. Anyway, so she said that Robin Williams, she goes, she goes, it was the weirdest request I'd ever had, and she goes, and I never thought of him the same again. But he would ask for that a certain number of the people working the performance that night were homeless. So he put his, it was like a selfless thing. It wasn't for him. It was to give somebody that was homeless a job. Make sure that people, working are somebody who needs a job. And I was like, wow, what a guy, So it's hard for me to have bitterness towards somebody like that, who's just so giving with his, maybe he didn't love himself enough, but he sure gave a lot of love. So
yeah, I've never heard anybody say, and he's one of there are very few celebrities I can count on one hand that every time somebody brings them up, even like not even like on TV interviews, but also like when I've known people that have worked with certain celebrities and stuff, and they'll have their stories. But as far as like Robin Williams, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about him ever.
I know, and
yeah.
and as far as his depression goes, I think there was a history of lifelong drug abuse and depression.
Yeah,
and he did seem to have a very challenging childhood. Some things I didn't know about until you sent me that video by Stefan Molyneux.
Oh, yeah, I was going to bring that up. Maybe you can put that in the show notes. I'll give you the link so people can watch that too. Very, very interesting. And he also brought up the fact of like the marriages that he had and how he was in a lot of debt. And I think Craig talked about that a little bit too, about just like your work and your stress level, So if like with Stefan Molyneux, he said that he calculated that the amount of money that they extorted from Robin Williams was $35 million.
Yeah.
Like, imagine having to pay $35 million. That's crazy,
Yeah.
So you'd have to do big budget movies, and he even made a comment saying that he'd like to do big budget movies, but smaller budget movies, which he did every once in a while. But he said he would probably like to do those more, but they don't pay the bills. So then you're like, if you're a really decent actor and you really believe in like quality work with gravitas, then you're taking these like silly roles that you're not really interested in, but you have to take them because you owe all this money to your vindictive, vicious ex-wives who used you for money.
Right.
And that on top of the stress of having to pay that money, it must be incredibly heartbreaking, to know that people used you for your money.
Right.
I
know, and if you have on top of that somebody who doesn't have necessarily the best self-esteem because he had a challenging childhood where he was very depressed, very lonely, and was really seeking a lot of love and attention from his parents who kind of weren't around, and then you come into the world that way, and then you get involved in drugs, and you sort of, it's like you just can't. I don't know. He just couldn't seem to catch ground on how wonderful he was. Like he just didn't seem to grasp it.
Yeah.
Kind of like and maybe that's why he was so nice. Because he was just so humble inside that he didn't pick up on that. But it was I don't know. I can't speak to that. And then years and years and years of drug abuse, and then he gets off of the drugs only to be then put on pharmaceutical drugs, which we talked about with Craig, and the other guests that we've had during this this series that we've been doing about Big Pharma and antidepressant drugs and stuff like that, is, there's these tremendous side effects that you get from taking these types of SSRI drugs. I still don't know that we know what he was on, but I found a clip from one of his stand-up acts, one of the more recent ones that he did, and he said that he was talking about how different drugs are today because everybody's getting their drugs from their doctor. And he said now he realizes his doctor is his dealer, and he did it in a funny way. It was a joke, and maybe if we have time, I'll play a clip of that at the end. But it was very telling. I thought, well, I bet that's true, because you go off of these.
It is true.
Right. I bet that's true as far as for his own personal experience. Yeah. In which case, it's even harder to blame him for it because, as we know, we've heard stories from people when they're on those drugs. Forget about it. They're not conscious of their actions. They're like, they get to a place where they don't even know. Like when we interviewed Gwen Olsen, she didn't want to kill herself. She almost killed herself, but then she didn't because she was afraid her husband would be angry with her for not letting the dog out.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Something. And it was just so irrational. It's like, but you'd be dead, so what do you care if he's mad at you? But that was her reasoning for not doing it. Thank goodness she didn't do it, but it's just your mind is not your own. Like your actions are not necessarily your own underneath those drugs. And then there are certain, as we've interviewed with Yolanda Lesueur, Dr. Yolanda Lesueur and Eileen Danneman, we've been talking about this this enzyme deficiency, where certain people are more prone to having those types of side effects.
Yeah.
So there's so many unknowns. We don't know that he was on that stuff. He probably was.
Plus, in addition to the drugs that he did too, that just, you know, I mean, so much, man.
It really is. And years of alcohol abuse,
and alcohol,
you know, could have just ravaged his immune system, his candida levels, and I guess, had just been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So, I mean, the poor guy. I mean, he was just going through the ringer, and in addition to the ex-wives, he also had like a woman who was accusing him of giving her an STD, and she who sued him, and he had to pay her out many years ago. And I actually remember this because when I was working at the courts and I was doing research like that, someone had asked me, or one of my jobs was to go in and look up files, and I had been assigned to look up the Robin Williams file, but I couldn't read the case because it was under seal. They had immediately, after it was filed, put it under seal. So I saw that there was a case. That's all you could see once a case has been put under seal. You can see that it exists or not, but you can't actually read what's going on in it. So he was sued by this woman. Said that she said that he gave her an STD. He didn't. He never admitted or said that he did or didn't. He just, but he did settle with her because he apparently did have sex with her. So, God, and that was kind of the point that Stefan Molyneux brought up, was that this guy sure paid a high price for, like, the people that he slept with. Yeah. You know, it's like, and he wasn't a player. It's not like you heard stories about him being at the strip club or doing all kinds of, you know, he wasn't like that. He just seemed to not be very good about his choices when it came to women. He picked a lot of women who were in it for the money.
And you would think if you were famous for that long that you would, I mean, and I'm not like judging him for it, but I'm just saying I would think that you're famous for that long that you would kind of get good at picking those people out, you know?
Well, apparently not. And he, you know, didn't, he just, I don't know, he just didn't seem to appreciate himself as much as the rest of us appreciated him.
Yeah, that's just terrible. Like, I mean, I never knew him, but so many people were upset in all races, and even one of my students was from China, and he knew who he was. I didn't even bring it up. He was like, "Oh, did you hear the guy that was in the Night of the Museum killed himself?"
Yeah.
And I was like, how do you know who he is? He's like, yeah, I know his movies, and I was like, wow, like he's reached not only generations but also to different countries, and because sometimes I don't know that I have different friends from different countries. I don't know what entertainers they know and which ones they don't know, But I was really surprised that my 12-year-old student from China knew who Robin Williams was and liked his movies and stuff,
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's he just touched so many people. It's that even young people, young and old, it's just everybody, because everybody knows him, and he continued to work, and he did do children's films where kids do know who he is, like Aladdin. He was great in that. As the genie, he is that movie. It's really
I know.
And so it's just
I'm so sad. I mean, he's somebody that I would really wanted to meet too. Oh,
I know. He's just. It is. I know. It's really sad. It's rare that I get so attached to a celebrity like that.
Yeah.
I just that I feel. I don't think I had this kind of sadness since the death of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
That was the last time I felt kind of oh, that's somebody from my childhood. Somebody I feel like I knew. They were a part of me. Which I know that sounds weird. Might sound weird to some people because, oh, who cares? They're just a celebrity. Blah blah blah. You don't know them personally.
Well, I mean, Michael Jackson. When I was in Taiwan, there was in Taiwan, over the city they have fruit stands, and there was this one that I would go to, and they would always play Michael Jackson music. So one day I went in there and I tried to talk to the owner because she didn't really know English, and I was like, "You like Michael Jackson?" And she didn't understand really what I said, but she just heard the words Michael Jackson, and she was like, "Michael Jackson! Ah!" And then she starts to moonwalk. And it was just really, interesting that, he was able to touch so many people around the world. And then when he died, like, I had a friend from Thailand, and I was like, oh, did you know who Michael Jackson is? She's like, are you kidding me? She goes, my friend from Thailand called me, and she was, like, crying. Like, it's just amazing that some artists have that reach that, their work just touches people that don't even know how to speak English, but they're moved by what they do. It's phenomenal to me.
It's true. I know. It's like and speaking of talent, Michael Jackson too. It's a different medium completely, but genius for sure. And without it, no one can deny that. No matter what they say about him and what he did in his life, it's just he was a talented man.
Yeah.
And but Robin Williams, there's no, you can say anything bad. Like, you can't even try to go there. Other than like that he maybe gave this woman an STD, but
if somebody gave it to him, like
right, but then then that means somebody gave it to him. He didn't go out suing that person and trying to call him out in public and shit like that, and trying to humiliate him. That's just rude.
Yeah.
It's like, take responsibility. Speaking of taking responsibility, like, you slept with the guy, come on, Well, he withheld the information. Well,
no, she just on his money.
No,
that's what she wanted. Like, that's just terrible. Like, I don't know, I know there are a lot of women that scream about equal rights and stuff, but, in some cases they get favoritism. In some instances they do too, and it's not fair, it shouldn't be a double standard. And I just wonder, how did it get to the point where women were allowed to sue men for that much money that they were with? Like, especially, I can understand, it's funny, have you seen that Eddie Murphy, from Raw, when he's talking about Johnny Carson years ago? It's amazing. It's the best, because he's just like, he's like, okay, well, I can understand if you're with somebody and you build that money together, you have a business you work and you build that money together. But if you just, like, marry somebody and then take half of their money, like, that shouldn't be legal,
It was in an article Kevin Hart had, when he went through the divorce with his wife, it was said that he was a jerk because he didn't give her that much money, like, she walked away without much. But I'm like, well, maybe that was her choice, because she wanted to get out of the marriage and she didn't want to drag it out.
Yeah.
And she was just being decent about it. He could have, and because then since then, I read that, he still buys her things, he still does things for her, and because she's the mother of his children, and he still takes care of them. So, if they can do it and it's not in the legal sense, it's like, it's not obligated, then that's fine. I don't feel like that's, and I don't know, maybe he is a jerk, but I'm not going to quickly leap to that based on the fact that she walked away without as much money, because he was the one that did that. He was the one that got famous doing stand-up and started making up money selling his tapes or selling his DVDs on his stand-up. That's how he got his money. So,
too, that I think that's honorable on her part. Maybe she was being fair and just was like, well, I didn't really make all this money. I'm going to take a little bit, maybe for whatever I need or whatever. But, that's great that she didn't, like, suck him dry,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like it might have just, that the fact, she could have dragged it out. They're calling him a jerk, but what was to stop her from getting a lawyer and, like, dragging the whole thing on? So it sounds to me like she made the choice not to, and because she wanted to just have it done with and, go on with her life. And I would like to think that I would do the same. I wouldn't want to walk away, like, make a profit off of your marriage, You just want to go away with it like, okay, well, I'm raising the kids now, and, I can work too, but I can't work as much because I'm raising my kids, so you got to help me with that. And he says, all right. He goes, okay, and I'll help you with that. You're right. Those are my kids too, so let's I'll make sure that you guys are taken care of, and then anything beyond that, that's on you. To get your fame and your fame, because she's a stand-up comic as well, but she's not nearly as famous.
Yeah.
And, so, that's her opportunity to go off and do that herself if she wants to, or just raise the kids, because it sounds like he's going to take care of her in that regard.
Yeah.
Make sure that she has enough to raise the children in a comfortable lifestyle. So, you know, come on. I'm not like, you don't get married to make a profit. That's just gross. That's prostitution. You know? What else would you call it? Somebody who has sex for money. It's like, or pretends to be in a relationship. I mean, maybe they're in it for a while and it's sincere, but I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that Robin Williams was depressed given all that information about him. And that he had just found out he had Parkinson's, which, by the way, is a side effect of these SSRI drugs. Stefan Molyneux did a follow-up, and he talked about that. He did a follow-up to the first video. So I'll post those both in the show links. But, yeah, it was it's a side effect, apparently. You have, as is, I think, some of the other drugs that he was on. So he had a cocktail of all these drugs over the years, which probably led to his early onset of Parkinson's disease, and you know, it was just too much for the guy. So that's unfortunate. So hopefully, you know,
that's terrible. I mean, wow.
I would have liked to see him find something like Craig's book or find information like that from some source that would have maybe helped him. But as far as I know, he didn't have that information. He didn't know that he could heal himself naturally, because I never heard or read anywhere that he was working on that. So that, and again, I think Rose, we've talked about this before, is like people who wake up. You know, there's a certain amount of self-esteem that goes with that.
Yeah.
It's like a certain amount of self-worth and self-love that you have to have attached to it. Otherwise, you don't see the value. You know. You don't see the value in it because you just don't care that much. So maybe that's true when it comes to going down the health road and finding alternative health. You have to sort of, or at least be motivated, like Craig said. I mean, it didn't sound like when he was in his darkest hour he was loving himself, but he loved his son enough to pull it around.
Yeah.
And, you know, so, anyway, so I don't know. I hope that if there's life on the other side, that Robin Williams has made a safe journey and is, you know, somewhere, somewhere his soul lives on. I hope.
Yeah, and making other people laugh.
Yeah, or just, you know, loving himself, like learning. You know, maybe if there's reincarnation, maybe he can come back and learn to love himself.
Yeah.
You know, and that way he won't and live a life where he can. I don't know, just appreciate who he is, or who he was. So, with that said, I think we're just about out of time, and thanks for listening to Truth or Talk. Till next time, peace, truth, and love, y'all.
Peace, truth, and love you guys. Bye-bye.
The shrimp and crab in this tank may not be feeling a lot of stress, all because scientists have put human antidepressant drugs in the water.
Drugs that can control serotonin can have a wide-ranging impact on organisms. For example, these snails over here have been shown to drop off the sides of tanks at certain concentrations of antidepressants in the water.
This isn't some crazy experiment by mad scientists. The researchers are replicating real-world conditions. They say the drugs humans take don't entirely break down. The antidepressants end up in the environment.
The ultimate repository of the water in our rivers are the estuaries and then the oceans. So we are continually flushing out all our human waste down into the sea.
Scientists say they've already discovered that male fish showed female traits after being exposed to estrogen in the water.
We don't know yet whether the antidepressants that we're currently looking at are having an effect in the rivers and streams and in the oceans around our countries. But we do know from laboratory studies that the concentrations that we detect them in the environment can have, sometimes very subtle, but sometimes very dramatic effects on the biology of these aquatic organisms.
For one thing, antidepressants make shrimp head toward the light instead of the dark. That might keep them from seeking out spaces under rocks and other hiding places that protect them from other animals seeking a fresh meal. Ultimately, the researchers say humans should be more concerned about the impact of our drugs on